All right, carrying on with 14200 fuses. 14200 sub-rule 1, time delay and low melting point fuses. Plug and cartridge fuses of the low melting point types, including time delay fuses that also have low melting points, shall be marked so as to be readily distinguishable. 2. The marking referred to in sub-rule 1 shall be the letter P for low melting point types that do not have time delay characteristics, and the letter D for time delay. So here I have a little example of an old school plug fuse panel. If you've never seen a plug fuse, you use them on the stoves, the old stoves. It's just simply a little fuse that rotates out. Let's take a look what it says here. 14202, we love to ask questions on plug fuses. Use of plug fuses. Plug fuses and fuse holders shall not be used in circuits exceeding 125 volts between conductors, except in circuits supplied from a system having a grounded neutral and having no conductor operating at more than 150 volts to ground. Okay, we get a lot of confusion with this rule here, you guys. Here we have a neutral. Even though I have a 240 volt oven element in my standard range in my house, my little elements, my cooktop elements, are 120 volts. Okay, I have the neutral here. Anywhere you take your meter to ground, it's going to be 120 volts. You comply with this rule, even though that your oven is rated 240. All right? So this rule, we capture a lot of people on misunderstanding here on the use of plug fuses. 14204, non-interchangeable fuses. Where plug fuses are used in branch circuits, they shall be of such a type and installed so that they are non-interchangeable with a fuse of a larger rating. So one of the problems we had with these fuses back in the day was the fuse would open the circuit, your grandpa would come in and look and say it says 15, he would go to the glass jar and pull out a 30, and there'd be nothing to stop him from screwing that in, and the conductor would only be rated for 15 amps. So the rejection features stop that from happening, where you can only put a 15 amp fuse in where it is required. That's what a non-interchangeable is. Sub-rule 2 says, where any alterations or additions are made to an existing fusible panel board, all the plug fuses in the panel board shall be made to comply with the requirements of sub-rule 1 where practicable. So when you walk into the old apartment built back in the early 1900s, they still might have these. If you are going to do any work here, you have to comply with sub-rule 1. 14206, fuse holders for plug fuses. Fuse holders for plug fuses shall be of the so-called covered type where they are readily accessible to unauthorized persons. 14208, ratings of fuses. Plug fuses shall be rated at not more than 30 amps. So no higher than 30 amps. It's marked right on it, and you can see it right through the window of the fuse. Standard cartridge fuses shall not be used in capacities larger than 600 amps or in circuits at more than 600 volts. So, in a disconnect, the largest fuse I can put in there, 600 amps. The fuses referred to in Rule 14212 B, C, and D that are used in circuits rated at 750 volts or less are not limited in current rating. 4. Fuses for use in circuits of more than 750 volts are not limited in current or voltage rating. 14210, fuses and fuse holders. Only fuses and fuse holders of proper rating shall be used, and no bridging or short circuiting of either component shall be permitted. All right? So we have the fuse holders here, and we have injection features where we can only put in and replace it with the same fuse. Now let's get down here to 14.2.12, use of fuses. People get confused here. You have all these different letters, and what do they mean? Well, we'll break it down into two categories, really. HRC1, HRC2. Class H fuses, where a standard interrupting rating, we'll start again. 14.2.12, use of fuses. Class C, CA, CB, CC, G, H, J, K, L, R, T, HRC1 miscellaneous, and HRC2 miscellaneous fuses shall be permitted to be used as follows. So don't get all wound up in all these different letters. They're just different sizes as far as dimensions. A, Class H fuses, where a standard interrupting rating of 10,000 amps symmetrical or less is required. So that's fault current. As long as my fault current is 10,000 amps or less, I can use a standard Class H fuse. B, Class CA, CB, CC, G, J, K, L, R, and T, or HRC1 miscellaneous, which have a higher interrupting rating, shall be permitted to be used instead of Class H. So HRC1 fuse does two things. It does overload and overcurrent protection. HRC2 fuses, as quirky as it is, only does one thing. It only does overcurrent protection. These are the ones we use for motors. Okay, so 100 amp fuse, HRC1, 100 amp HRC2 fuse, I can't use the HRC2 fuse in lieu of the HRC1. You'll have no overload protection. All right? I can use an HRC1 in lieu of an HRC2, but not the other way. C says, Class C and HRC2 miscellaneous fuses shall be permitted to be used for overcurrent protection only, where circuit overload protection is provided by other means. These fuses are not tested for overload protection. They're only for overcurrent. So we use them in motors. That's kind of what, it doesn't really say motors there, but in section 28, we provide overload protection for the conductors with the overloads. And then D, Class C and HRC2 miscellaneous fuses shall be permitted to be used in those applications where this code permits the installation of fuses greater than the ampere rating of the load, provided that the rating of the Class C or HRC2 miscellaneous fuse does not exceed 85% of the maximum permitted rating. So the big thing out of there, you guys, HRC2 fuses, overcurrent only. Motors, HRC1 has a 200,000 amp interrupting rating. So I use the Class H fuse with 10,000 amps or less. If my fault current is greater than 10,000 amps, I got to go to an HRC1. It gives me overcurrent and overload, just like the Class H fuse does, but it gives me the higher interrupting rating. All right? So that takes care of our fuses.